I want you to pause for a moment right now and ask yourself something that most people never dare to confront. What if everything you've been chasing, success, love, and peace, isn't something you need to acquire, but something you must remember? What if the highest frequency in the universe, the very vibration of God, is already inside you, humming quietly beneath the noise of your life, waiting for you to tune in? You see, there are people walking among us who are not like the rest. They are the chosen ones. And no, I'm not talking about ego or superiority or some divine lottery. I'm talking about those rare souls who have begun vibrating on God's frequency, not metaphorically, but energetically, spiritually, literally. These individuals don't just talk about love, they radiate it. They don't just seek truth, they embody it. And the moment you begin to recognize the signs, you'll realize something shocking. You might be one of them. But let me tell you, it's not always glamorous. In fact, it can be terrifying. Because to vibrate on God's frequency means to see through illusions that most people cling to like lifeboats in a storm. It means to feel everything more deeply, to hear the silence behind the world's noise, to be awake in a dream where everyone else is asleep. And once you see, you cannot unsee. You become responsible not just for your own soul, but for the light you carry into every room, every conversation, every choice. The first sign that you're vibrating on God's frequency is something most people misinterpret: isolation. You'll feel like you don't fit in anymore, because truthfully, you don't. The same people you used to laugh with might now feel like strangers. The places you used to find comfort in may suddenly feel hollow. And here's the kicker: this isn't a punishment. It's a sacred preparation. Because when you're chosen, you must be separated before you can be elevated. God doesn't call you in the crowd. God whispers to you in the stillness, in the silence, in the ache of your own becoming. Have you noticed that when your life feels like it's falling apart, it's often falling into place? That divine frequency isn't broadcasted over loudspeakers. It hums in the quiet moments when you're left alone with your thoughts, your doubts, your soul. If you've been walking through a season of loneliness, don't curse it. That may be the very space where heaven is reprogramming your spirit.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But here's the second sign, and it's even more subtle. You start to lose your appetite for the things that once fed your ego. You stop feeling entertained by gossip. You stop craving validation from people who don't even know themselves. You begin to notice how loud the world is, how desperate everyone is to be seen, to be liked, to be heard, and yet how few are truly known. And in that realization, something shifts inside you. You stop chasing applause and start seeking alignment. You stop asking, "How can I win?" and start asking, "What is right? What is true? What is real?" Let me ask you something that might shake you. Would you still walk your spiritual path if it meant no one ever noticed? If there were no followers, no rewards, no promises of success, would you still seek God? Because vibrating on that divine frequency means you're not here for the performance of spirituality. You're here for the presence. You're here for the peace that surpasses understanding. You're here not to be seen, but to truly see. The third sign is what I call divine disruption. Life doesn't just get quiet, it gets loud in mysterious ways. Things start falling away: relationships, jobs, habits, even identities. It feels chaotic, even cruel. But this is where most people give up. They mistake the storm for a curse, not realizing it's a cleansing. The old you cannot survive in the new frequency. The ego you built to protect yourself from pain is incompatible with the frequency of unconditional love. So it has to crumble not to destroy you, but to reveal you. You begin to notice synchronicities, numbers repeating, dreams becoming vivid, people showing up in your life at exactly the right moment with messages that feel too precise to be coincidence. You're not going crazy. You're tuning in. Heaven doesn't speak in paragraphs. It speaks in signs, symbols, and sacred nudges. The question is, are you paying attention? Or are you still trying to control the unfolding with your limited mind? Let me offer you something that might sound strange. If your life is currently uncomfortable, uncertain, or even falling apart, you might be exactly where you're supposed to be. Because God doesn't elevate without excavating. You cannot rise until you release. And sometimes the very thing you're clinging to is the anchor keeping you from ascending. And then there's the fourth sign, maybe the most beautiful and painful of all. Your heart breaks open. Not just through sorrow, but through compassion. You start feeling the pain of others not as an observer, but as a witness. You cry more. You care more. You begin to understand people at a level beyond words, beyond logic. You might even feel like your emotions are too much, too intense. But that's not a weakness. That's your soul waking up. God's frequency is love. Not romantic love, not conditional love, but the kind of love that holds space for everyone, even those who've hurt you. Especially them. You begin to forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You choose to let go not because it's easy, but because your spirit can no longer afford to carry what isn't yours. And so you find yourself walking this paradox stronger than ever, yet more vulnerable than you've ever allowed yourself to be. You're no longer trying to protect your energy by shrinking, but by shining. You no longer walk into rooms trying to be accepted. You walk in as acceptance itself. This is what it means to vibrate on God's frequency. You don't become better than others, you become more yourself. And in doing so, you become a mirror for others to remember who they are. Let me leave you with this for now. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be loved and instead started becoming love itself? What decisions would you make? What would you release? Who would you become? The journey is just beginning. And if you're still watching, still listening, still feeling this in your bones, it's because you're not here by accident. You're being called. And the call isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper beneath your ribs, thrumming with the pulse of divinity. If you've come this far, it's not by chance, it's because something inside you is stirring. Maybe it's been dormant for years, or maybe it's only now beginning to awaken. But whatever it is, it's not ordinary. It's a knowing, a quiet yet overwhelming realization that your life is not random. That you're not just here to survive, achieve, or repeat. You're here to remember. And when you begin vibrating on God's frequency, that remembrance hits you like a sacred fire burning from the inside out. The fifth sign, the rarest, and perhaps the most undeniable, is purpose ignition. Suddenly, your soul begins to crave something more than comfort, more than success, more than safety. It yearns to serve. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of alignment. You begin to feel the pulse of a mission, one that may not even have words yet, but you know it's real. You feel it when you're alone, when you're still, when the noise of the world dies down and all that's left is the rhythm of your breath and the ache of your calling. And this is where everything begins to shift. You may look around and realize the life you've built doesn't reflect the person you're becoming. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel hollow. The goals you once chased now feel meaningless. You're no longer driven by ambition, you're pulled by vision. And this transition can be terrifying. Because when your soul awakens, it doesn't ask for permission. It demands truth. It demands action. It demands that you stop hiding, stop pretending, and stop postponing the sacred work you were designed to do. Let me ask you something that could change you forever. If you knew the universe assigned you a mission before you were born, something only you could do, would you still be living the way you are right now? Would your days look the same? Would your priorities? Would your relationships? When you're vibrating on God's frequency, you no longer chase what everyone else chases. You begin to walk a path that is narrow not because it's lonely, but because it requires integrity. You can't carry everything with you anymore. You have to travel light in spirit, light in truth, light in energy. You'll find that people start falling away, not because of drama, but because your vibration no longer matches theirs. And you don't need to fight it. You bless them. You release them. Because you know that what's meant for you is drawn not by force, but by frequency. And yes, it can hurt. It can feel like you're losing everything. But what you're really losing is the version of you that was never real to begin with. The mask, the performance, the programmed self. And in its place emerges the authentic you. The you that is not afraid to speak truth, even when your voice shakes. The you who knows that peace is more valuable than approval. The you who would rather be aligned with heaven than applauded by the world. There's a strange paradox that happens when you align with God's frequency. You begin to feel both incredibly small and infinitely important. You realize you are a single drop in an ocean of divine intelligence, and yet, without your drop, the ocean is incomplete. That is the mystery of the chosen ones. They don't walk with arrogance. They walk with reverence. They know the weight of their presence, and they carry it with humility. You begin to notice that your inner world becomes more important than anything external. You start guarding your energy like it's sacred because it is. You stop giving your time to things that drain you, and you start investing in what expands you: silence, prayer, nature, teaching, healing. You start listening more, not just to people, but to life. You realize that God doesn't just speak through scripture. God speaks through sunsets, through strangers, through synchronicities, through suffering. And you begin to honor that. You begin to see that every moment is holy. Every decision is a vibration. Every thought is either a prayer or a poison. You stop judging people by what they say and start feeling their frequency. You start seeing through facades. You begin to discern truth not with your mind, but with your spirit. You no longer fall for charisma, you look for character. You don't get seduced by noise, you search for depth. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because once you step into this frequency, you realize you can't go back. You can't unknow what you now know. And so you commit. Not just once, not just when it's easy, but every single day. You wake up and choose alignment. You choose love. You choose to embody the light you once only admired in others. You become the blessing you used to pray for. You become the miracle someone else is waiting for. That's what it means to be chosen. Not to be better, but to be available, to be willing, to be emptied of the noise so you can be filled with the divine, and to be a vessel, not a victim, a lighthouse, not a follower, a mirror that reflects heaven into earth. And let me tell you this, the world needs you now more than ever. Not the masked you, not the performative you, but the real you, the one who knows how to sit with pain without judging it, to love without possessing, to serve without seeking validation. The one who has surrendered not because they're weak, but because they are strong enough to trust. So if you're still wondering if you're chosen, if you're still questioning whether this message is for you, let me make it clear, it is. You wouldn't be here, reading this, feeling this, unless your soul was ready to hear it. You've been prepared through every heartbreak, every loss, every dark night of the soul. You've been forged in fire, not to burn, but to illuminate. You've been broken, not to suffer, but to open. You've been called not to perform, but to transform. And now you stand at the edge of becoming. The question is not whether you are chosen. The question is, will you choose yourself? Will you answer the call? Will you rise to the vibration that is already whispering your name? Because this isn't about religion. This isn't about dogma. This is about frequency. About tuning your life to the highest possible vibration and becoming the embodiment of divine love, divine truth, divine purpose. And if that scares you, good. It means your ego is trembling. It means your old self is shaking. And that's exactly where transformation begins. So now you've heard the call. You felt it in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet moments when no one's watching. You've glimpsed the truth that you are not just a body walking through time, but a soul vibrating in eternity. And once you've stepped onto the path of the chosen ones, once you've tasted the clarity of God's frequency, there's no going back to noise, to numbness, to normalcy. But what happens next? This is where most people struggle. They awaken, they feel the fire, they know they're meant for more, but they don't know how to live it. This part of the journey is not about dramatic revelations or mystical experiences. It's about integration. It's about building a life that can sustain the frequency you're beginning to embody. Because here's the truth, you can't hold God's frequency in a life filled with chaos, distraction, and self-betrayal. You must become the container for what you've been called to carry. You must become a living temple. And so we begin to rebuild. The first place we rebuild is within. If you're vibrating on God's frequency, then your inner world must become sacred ground. You can no longer afford to tolerate thoughts that degrade your spirit. You must begin to cultivate mental clarity, emotional honesty, spiritual humility. Every thought you think becomes a seed in the garden of your life. Are you planting weeds or are you planting wisdom? Ask yourself, if my inner world were a temple, would I let anyone walk in with muddy feet? Would I let my own fears graffiti the walls? Would I let self-doubt light a fire in the sanctuary? This is the work of the chosen ones. We don't just seek peace, we become peace. We don't just pray, we live as prayer. And that means we must become ruthless about what we allow into our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our homes. Not from a place of fear, but from a place of reverence. You begin to notice what feeds your spirit and what poisons it. You start paying attention to the music you listen to, the conversations you entertain, the content you consume. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're trying to protect the frequency you've worked so hard to find. You realize that everything is energy, and everything is either raising your vibration or lowering it. There is no neutral. You begin to make space literal and spiritual for the divine to dwell. You might clear out your physical space, yes, but more importantly, you begin to clear out emotional clutter. You forgive not to let others off the hook, but to unhook yourself from energetic chains. You let go of resentment because you realize it's the heaviest thing you carry, and it blocks the light from flowing through you. Now, here's where many people fall off. They awaken, they cleanse, they even embrace the call, but they forget to anchor it in consistent practice. Vibrating on God's frequency is not a one-time event, it's a daily alignment. It's not about feeling spiritual when life is calm, it's about remaining centered when the storm hits. So I ask you, what are your rituals? Not just the ones you inherited, but the ones your soul craves. Do you start your day in silence, or do you reach for your phone? Do you nourish your spirit before you nourish your schedule? Do you create space to listen not just to the world, but to the whisper of the divine moving through your life? The chosen ones know that consistency is more powerful than intensity. A single moment of bliss is beautiful, but a daily practice of presence builds unshakable peace. Whether it's breath work, prayer, meditation, journaling, movement, or even just walking in nature, the point is not the method. The point is the devotion. The point is to come back to yourself again and again until your life becomes a sanctuary. And once you create that inner temple, something miraculous begins to happen. Your external life starts to reorganize itself around your new vibration. Opportunities shift, people shift. Everything that's out of alignment either transforms or falls away. It can be disorienting, but remember, God's frequency is magnetic. When you hold it, you no longer chase what's meant for you. You attract it. You call it in. You become a lighthouse, and the right ships find their way. This is where true spiritual maturity begins. You no longer need to convince anyone. You no longer need to prove anything. You're not trying to be understood by everyone because you understand yourself. You don't need to explain your path to those who can't see it. You know that your light speaks louder than your words ever could. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with authority. Not with pride, but with peace. You start to move through life as though it's sacred because it is. Every step becomes a prayer. Every word becomes an offering. Every moment becomes a chance to either raise the vibration of the planet or contribute to its suffering. And this is the true weight of being chosen. You are now responsible for your frequency. You can no longer pretend you don't know. You can no longer participate in what drains your spirit. You can no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You stand tall not to dominate, but to serve. You lead not with force, but with frequency. And yes, you will be tested. The world will try to pull you back into noise, into fear, into the illusion of separation. But your job is not to fight darkness, it's to be light. Your job is not to convert others, it's to embody truth. Your job is not to be perfect, it's to be authentic. That is the true revolution. That is the divine rebellion. So I ask you now, what does your life look like when it becomes the answer to your prayers? What does your energy feel like when you stop leaking it into doubt, drama, and distraction? What would it mean to build every day, every breath, every choice around the vibration of love? Because when you're aligned with God's frequency, you don't just change your life, you change the field around you. Your presence becomes a healing. Your silence becomes a sermon. Your being becomes a blessing. And the world begins to notice, not because you're louder, but because your light is no longer hidden. You become a walking reminder to others that they too are divine, that they too can awaken. You become a living transmission of what's possible when a soul remembers where it came from. That is the legacy of the chosen ones,